I knew that he was going to be the reason I ended up in jail. MJ went and picked me up. I tied the blades of the helicopter up, and then we were due to do our first drop the next morning. I remember that morning, I woke up really early, couldn't sleep the night before. You know, it was a lot of stress. I think, well, I was, you know, a couple of bags, we're heading south, about 200 pounds of weed. So I didn't sleep. What did we do? I picked my buddy up, and then we drove. I remember, you know, getting the helicopter all prepared, but we stopped at a supermarket early in the morning, and I said to him, you know, if you had to eat something, would you eat cream of chicken or chunky beef? And he's going, why? And I said, just pick one of them, you know, if you had to eat it. He goes, fucking hate that shit. I'll go chunky beef. Cool, cool, cool. If you had to drink, would it be Fiji or Dasani? He goes, oh, I like Fiji. Cool. Grab a case of each. And I throw it in the back seat. As we're in the hangar, I'm getting the helicopter ready. I'm doing the fuel checks. I said, put that soup and that water in the back, in the cargo hold. He goes, why is that? I don't understand. I said, because if we crash and we're not dead, we've got about an 80-mile walk to get back to Canada through the wilderness. We're gonna need to eat and drink something. So that's what that was for. And you could just see the blood drain from his face. Like, this was real shit we're about to do. It was a cold morning, it was winter. We pushed the helicopter out onto the pad. It was really, really cold. It was mostly -5 or something. So I went through the different checks, and we fired it up. I actually didn't know how to work the navigation system because I'm not a pilot. I didn't know how to work the heater, so we were fucking freezing. And I couldn't work all the instruments with gloves on. So as I'd turn the instruments, he had a flashlight on all the instruments, and he's putting my gloves on as I need them taken off and taking them on as I'm starting the engine. I just remember this thing winding up. It's a jet engine, and Terry looking at me saying, look dude, I'm a single dad, I got 2 kids, are we gonna die today? And I said, mate, it's a 50-50. I don't know, we can make a shitload of money or we can die. I can't tell you which way it's gonna swing. I think I can do it, and that's what I've thought my whole life, but I wasn't sure. So he said, look, I'll take 50%. So off we go, we spill the chopper up and we lift off. We'd already made some previous landing spots. We'd picked out, I'd driven around in my car because I wanted to spend less time in the helicopter than I could because that thing scared the fucking shit out of me. The first drop, was in a quarry. We'd picked in a little town next to an old quarry. And you know, say the sun was coming up, we could see the cars and that on the road. And everything, of course on your first one, everything fucks up. You know, it's a complete fucking schmozzle. I'm at about 1,000 feet. He's running a half an hour late. I'm just getting used to just flying this thing. Like, it's like a toy. I'm just cruising around, but I don't want to cruise around too much. I actually went and landed in the middle of a raging river on a rock just to see if I could do it with the water shooting on either side. Like the dumbest thing to do before you're about to do a big drug drop. So we get word that he's only about 5 minutes away from the drop zone. So I take off, climb up, and then I look down, I can see the van moving through the roads. But I could also see 2 police cars. Fuck, what do we do? And it's like, look, I can see him then go down into the pit of the old quarry, and I'm like, it's go time. So from 500 feet down with the collective, I swoop down, I fly in behind the van, and I fly right up to the van and then drop this thing on the ground. And at this point, your heart's pounding. The adrenaline going through your body is just out of this world. But what I'd actually done is parked the wrong way. So the van's facing this way, the road is behind me, and I'm facing sort of side on, but I can't see the road. So if one of those police cars is following the van, I can't see him coming because I'm sort of strapped into the helicopter. So everything's going wrong. My mate jumps out, he's pulling bags out of the van. I didn't realise how big the bags were gonna be. I fucking near died when I seen all these big duffel bags coming out. You know, so much is going on. The wind going through the helicopter, the doors are open, it's like -5. He's throwing bags in the back, trying to stuff them in, and then shutting the doors, and then climbing back in. And at this point, this is when life changes. It's like, We are now not only not flying without a license or pilots, we are now officially drug smugglers. This was that moment in time that you went, life's changed forever. You'll always be that, it's that one. Flying around was nothing. It was when those bags were loaded and I looked over it would have looked this side of Terry and said, let's get out of here. So I pulled up, climbed out, and we were always had a really funny, he could always make me laugh, I could make him laugh, but on that first trip down to the US, nobody was laughing. I was flying at about 2,300 feet and it was right where the snow, the snow line was. I figured the bottom of my helicopter was white with a red top and I figured I could blend in with the mountains. We didn't know where we were going. We had some GPS coordinates. We had about 40 minutes to go because I knew the hot zone in the borders were within about a 10-mile radius of the border. So we had a different plan to fly about 80 miles south. So it was quite a long flight through the mountains. Can't describe that day. The weather was just absolutely shocking. I knew nothing about weather and I knew nothing about navigation. I just had my mate sit next to me with his fishing GPS and him just saying left, right, left, right. I actually kept getting pushed down onto these power lines, but he could see that I was just fighting this thing. We had some massive weather and I just didn't have the experience to tackle it. But we managed to go through it. It took about 10 minutes I actually thought we were gonna land on the high voltage power wires, but he could see me fighting it and struggling. So I was happy to pop out of that weather, only to look over at his face, and I could see this look on his face sort of going, what's wrong, mate? I can tell something's wrong. And he goes, fuck, dude, I didn't want to tell you this, but we've gone too far. It's actually 10 miles back the other way. So we actually had to go back through that weather. We got to our spot and it wasn't a forest like it was promised. It was somebody's backyard. They were about 1 acre blocks. And I remember I was on the phone flying and trying to call the syndicate to ask, am I in the right area? And he said, yes, you are. The guys are gonna walk out from the house and wave at you. They can see you. So I actually had to fly over an estate, come down the road, land in somebody's backyard, drop off some bags and then leave again, which was, again, another pretty fucking stupid move. But we did it. Now, feeling home is like a feeling you can't describe, like the biggest rush you've ever had. We just did it and we got away with it. And we were singing Sweet Home Alabama all the way back to Canada. We landed, we were so happy, pushed the chopper away. I got paid around lunchtime and I think my first paycheck was around $55,000 for really about 3 hours work. It was incredible. So I had found the business for me. And then we started doing these things regular. I got better at flying. We got better spots and I was just constantly refining it. But again, I still wasn't a pilot. I actually signed, I could afford to go to flying school and I'd signed up to go and start taking lessons. So it was really funny, ironic some mornings when I would do an early morning drop. And then on the way home, I would stop at the flying school to see if I could get some lessons. And the instructors would go, look, Tim, I think the weather's a little bit bad today. We might just ground everything and you can do some ground school. Again, I'm not that smart. So I said, I'll skip the ground school. I'll just head to the casino. And I was, making money hand over fist. So I had my new business. Everything seemed to be going along well. I was making a lot of money. And something happened to our landing crew. Our first landing crew got hot. What's called hot is where they thought that the authorities were onto them, so we actually had to cancel those boys and find some new ones. There's a lot of moving parts when you're working for a big organization, a cartel, is they had another crew that they wanted me to meet. We decided to have lunch one day and I caught up with this guy. He was an engineer from Boeing. And we had lunch in a little town and he was going to organise our new ground crew for the US side. And from that lunch, I knew that he was going to be the reason I ended up in jail. I had a premonition, I had a gut feeling, and I trust the gut feeling. And the gut feeling was this guy was going to be the guy. And when I left that lunch, I said to one of the big bosses, I don't like your friend. And it's a pretty ballsy move to say to somebody, I don't like your friend. There was just something. And it's about trusting your inner gut, and I didn't. And he goes, no, I've worked for this guy for years. He used to run it in boats, he's worth millions, he just wants to get back in the business. He's all good, don't worry about it, Tim. And they didn't call me Tim, he didn't know my fucking name. Well, I'm sure he did, but they called me the jockey. So first morning of the first drop with this guy, everything's going wrong that morning. The credit card doesn't work and sun's coming up, everyone's running late. I called the boss and said, I don't think today's the day. And I remember just sitting on the skids of the chopper out in the middle of the field waiting for fuel or waiting to sort of see what to do. And my buddy's saying, Tim, we shouldn't go today. And I agreed and I called. And when you're working for people, you don't have that option. They said, everyone's in place, you're going. I've sorted the fuel out. And then I looked out, the airport authorities are now coming out to give me fuel, which I thought was an absolutely fucking stupid move, because here we are standing next to a $750,000 helicopter with not $500 to our name or a credit card that would work. You'd think you'd have all this in place. So the airport authorities gave us the fuel, and that was the beginning of the end. There's small things in time. So off we go. The sun's up. Everyone's up. The airport authorities have contacted the US at this point and said there's a couple guys in a 206 Jet Ranger. You might want to watch them. I go over and pick the stuff up, and then I start flying south. And by this stage, I'd done 18 or 20 drops, so I was quite comfortable with, I wasn't, it was just a day at work for me. But still, in the world of aviation, not even a fully fledged pilot, not by a long shot. As I was flying down to the US, they were actually watching me from a drone above and seen me heading through the mountains, and then actually filmed the drop itself. So what I didn't know at the time is this was actually that landing crew's first ever time. So as they pulled out with the gear, I headed back to Canada, and they followed me back, and I got back. I actually got pulled over on the side of the road by the police, and I didn't think anything of it. They just wanted to get my name because they knew I came from that helicopter, and they let me go. And by that afternoon, I hadn't been paid, and so I was questioning, like, where's the money? Why haven't we been paid? And then bang, we find out that everyone in the US has now been arrested. They got them on the side of the road. Into a tailspin. Has anything been said? No, nothing's been said. And it was that crew's first ever morning. So I felt kind of bad. Everyone was in a little bit of shock, but that's the nature of the business. But I'm not used to this business, so it kind of rocked me a little bit. Everyone assured me that nothing was said and that they were going to get out on bail. Nothing was further from the truth. So ironically enough, I was counting my money that night, and I had this really bad dream. I had a bad dream at about 11 o'clock, and my girlfriend at the time woke me up and said, you were crying in your sleep. I said, I dreamt that my mum was dying. Serendipity. I got a call about 3 hours later at about 2 a.m. in the morning saying that you'd got to get back to Australia, that mum's dying. She'd had a brain aneurysm. So, my world goes into a spin. Money's in the apartment. At the time, you had to wait till about 8 o'clock before I could call a travel agent and get a ticket to get back to Australia. And so that's what I did. About lunchtime, I was on a flight heading back to Australia, but I had to fly through San Francisco. I got held up for a long time in San Francisco, not realizing what was going on behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, my world was actually slowly getting pinned up, but I was still a moron and had no idea. 2 hours later, I begged them. I said, look, I've got to go. My mum's dying, and so they let me go. I flew back to Sydney, flew from Sydney up to Brisbane, Brisbane up to Rockhampton. Got there, mum's still alive, but she's in a bad way. And so I spent the next week with my family. My little brother, the family were coming in from all over. and it wasn't looking good. Like, they said she was actually going to start to come out of it. So I was getting a lot of pressure from Canada to come back to continue flying. So I had a word with my brother, my little brother, in the typical Australian, colour-bond shed out the back, and I said, look, Dad and Dave, I've got to go back to Canada. I'll just go back for 3 days, and I'll come back, and I'll make sure I'll get us through this. And I always felt like a bit of a, the family matriarch, or, the older brother. I'll get us all through it. So my brother and my dad said, we don't know what you do, but it's clear that it can't be good, because nobody flies halfway around the world for 3 days work and comes back. I assured him that I had it all under control. I went and kissed Mum, goodbye, and I said that I would see her next week. I would be back on the following Thursday on a plane back to Sydney. And it's those moments in life or time where the plane was broken down on the runway for 6 hours. And I remember being on the phone to Dad and saying, if this thing's not fixed soon, I'm getting off, blah, 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 blah. And within the next 15 minutes, that plane is up and working, and we are off to Los Angeles. A long flight into LA, 14 hours later, 6 hours on the tarmac. I've been flying for 20 hours. And I specifically remember this. The pilot came on and said, could everyone have their passports at the door upon exiting the aircraft? And I thought that was really strange, because we already had to give them at customs. And I just thought it was a strange request. So anyway, I got the passports out. I was with a girlfriend at the time. And as I got to the door, I handed it to the lady, and the lady handed it to a guy. And this is when time just stops. And it started going in slow motion, because I looked up, and I didn't know what ICE meant, I-C-E. And they just grabbed my passport, looked at me, looked at the passport and said, Mr. Smith, we've been waiting here a long time for you. And I knew from that point, I was in some trouble. I didn't know how much trouble at that point. I don't know whether my brain hadn't clicked into what was going to happen. And it clearly hadn't, because of what I'm about to tell you. So off we go, we collect my bags, and we're separated. My girlfriend goes into a room, I go into a room, and about 3 hours later they come in to talk to me. And they just start pushing pictures in front of me of my whole organisation. They know everything. And at this point I said, I need to talk to a lawyer. And they said, you're going to be a tough guy, eh? And I said, it appears to be. I just figured I'd talk to a lawyer, get out and bail and fly home, and I'd get all this worked out. But my life was about to change forever. They stopped being nice. They let my girlfriend go, and she flew back to Canada. And they proceeded to put handcuffs on me. And it's the first time, that little boy from Queensland is now in LAX with handcuffs on. And I remember them putting the jacket over, and one of the agents said, okay, big boy, we're gonna walk out here in public, and if you try anything, I'm gonna fuck you up. And I thought, okay, so, all the niceness is over. We had a car waiting outside, and I remember, I got slid in the middle. There was an ICE agent next to me, which is the Immigration and the Customs Enforcement. They deal with anything to do with the US border. They had one sitting on this side, I was in the middle, and then another guy here, and then two in the front. By this stage, I'd mostly been awake for close to 30 hours. I was hungry. And I remember them talking about the motel, and I'm thinking, I wonder who I'm gonna have to share a room with. This is the fucked up thoughts that I was thinking. Like, I don't want to share it with this guy next to me. He seems like a fucking arsehole. The guy on the other side, hey, he could be a cool roomie. I'm thinking we're going back to a motel, because that's what they're saying. Hey, should we have Mexican? Fuck, I love Mexican. I could go for some fajitas and a bit of salsa. This is how warped my thinking was. So as I was driving, I'm thinking, okay, Mexican food. The worst thing I think is gonna happen is I'm gonna have to share a hotel room with one of these assholes. That wasn't the case. We pull into this holding facility, and I went, where are we? Because it doesn't look like the Motel 6. We're actually at LA County Jail. The feds are full up, so you're in state. I'm like, I'm going to jail? That's what I actually said. They actually started laughing and said, yeah, dickhead. You're going to jail. We're going for Mexican. You're going to jail. It just fucking dawned on me. I'm going to jail. Holy shit. So reality's hit that I'm actually going to jail for the first time in my life. Yeah, not any jail. I'm going to LA County Jail. There's 7,500 inmates there. 32, 33, I think it was. It's considered the worst jail in all of America. Like, holy fucking shit. It's 2 in the morning by this stage. I'm getting stripped off for the first time. I've never been a team sport player, so I've never really gotten undressed in front of anyone. And they're just like, off with your clothes. I stripped out. I got booked in. I just remember this woman, me talking to the guard, just saying, am I gonna get raped tonight? It's all these, this is not really happening to me. This is not happening, but it actually is. I finally get, I get processed in and I get to my cell somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning. There's this huge guy on the bottom bunk. I climb up to the top bunk. This stage, I must have been awake for 2 days. I try and get some sort of sleep, which you really can't. It would have been about 5 o'clock in the morning, 4:30. Would have been 2 hours after I just got into bed. They actually call for court, and that's how it's done. It takes hours to get prepared for court. And I remember them just calling out your name and you can hear your door pop and you get up and it's my first night in jail. I'm the kid from the bush. I'm in one of the biggest cities in America in the biggest jail, getting called for court. You know, breakfast is not even like breakfast in anything you've ever seen.